this a sawdust for?
I'll tell you later. Following on from the launch of our beer in cans and the relaunch of our gin and vodka range, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the history of beer and some of the context surrounding these. Beer was invented by, well, we don't actually know, but it was thousands of years ago, give or take a fortnight. It's said that the beer making process was an accidental discovery when the grains used to make bread began to ferment. There's a bit of a debate about the origins of beer, and I'm not going to weigh in on that. Although it is said that beer can be traced back to the Neolithic period, ancient Egyptians used beer as an offering to their gods, and it was consumed in everyday life. However, in ancient Greece and Rome, wine was used as an offering, although beer was still very popular among the lower classes. The Middle Ages saw the rise of small beers, or table beers. These were low in alcohol and were drunk by everybody, including small children. The fact that they were low in alcohol meant they could be consumed in quite large quantities. The level of alcohol in the beer is all down to the process. To make beer, you need grain, sugar, and water. To make small beer, you might have foraged around the hedgerows for things like dandelion leaves or nettles. I've gone and picked myself some nettles and some dandelion leaves, and to those I'm going to add some warm water. I'm now going to boil them for 15 minutes. Now, I'm going to leave those for 12 hours. Now, those have been soaking for 12 hours, so I'm going to remove the leaves. So what we have here now is the flavoured water from the dandelion leaves and the nettles. I'm now going to add some sugar and yeast, which will start the fermentation process and eventually create beer. What we'll do is warm this up near a fire, and that'll activate the yeast and start the process. Once the yeast is activated, we're going to cover it and leave it for about 7 days, and then it'll be ready to drink. As you can see, the process is quite simple. It was in the 9th century, though, that hops started to be introduced to the process. Hops are the flowers of the hop plant, and they were used as a bittering, flavouring and stabilising agent. They have a flowery, fruity and citrusy aroma, and also act as a bit of a preservative. They didn't grow very well in the northeast, so the hops we used 200 years ago tended to be brought up from the south of the country. But they're not for horses. For our Drover's Ale, Yew Beauty, we've used Golding's hops, which remain a quintessential British hop, suitable for our 1820s inspired ale. And you can't beat a good pint here at the Drover's Tavern. By the 18th and 19th centuries, drinking small beer was socially acceptable, even at work. Beer continued to be improved and developed throughout the 19th centuries, and in Europe once again became part of everyday life. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, with the coming of the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the steam engine, beer making became quicker, more advanced and more precise. As cities grew, so did the breweries. While some taverns would have brewed their own ale, brew houses were set up that would have supplied multiple taverns across the town. In 1890, Newcastle Breweries was formed, which was made up of 5 existing breweries, represented to this day by the 5 points on the star. These breweries were John Barris & Co., J.J. and W.H. Allison, which was 2 breweries, Carr Brothers & Carr, and Swinburne & Co.
So, what'll it be? Lager or an ale?
What's the difference?
Well, it's all to do with the yeast and the fermentation process. You see, the yeast used to make an ale is fermented at a higher temperature, as opposed to the yeast used to make a lager, which is fermented at a lower temperature.
I'll have a gin.
In the late Georgian and early Victorian era, gin palaces were popping up all over London and then in other parts of the country. These were the precursor to the modern pub, and it was somewhere where you could enjoy a drink surrounded by more modern amenities than those of your average inn or tavern. The UK government frowned upon these gin palaces, and in 1830 introduced the Beer Act, which allowed people to produce and sell beer exclusively, which began the rise of the beer house. But within 40 years, this was overturned, allowing sellers to obtain a license, allowing them to sell beer, gin, and other spirits. And there we have the birth of the traditional public house, or pub.
Right, last orders everybody. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that very brief history of beer and some of the context it gives to the stories here at Beamish.
You haven't actually told me what the sawdust is for.
Ah, the sawdust. Well, that's to absorb the spills and odours. People spit in it. They'll also sometimes even urinate it. And we'll leave it there for about a week. So it's probably best to visit on a Monday. Anyway, sling your rug. I'll see you tomorrow.